Coaching Conversations with Katy and Kinita, and we often will talk about strengths because we are, like I said, both certified strengths coaches, and we love how strengths really weaves through the fabric of our stories and even in the stories of our friends and our families. And so when we get together, we like to just, pick a particular topic that might enhance strengths, and maybe even you as the listener would get motivated and inspired to take your strengths assessment. It's so valuable, right? Katy, don't you think? Like
Yes.
even when you took yours?
So helpful. I mean, gives you such great insight on and language, I think, to understand like, oh, that's why I'm always thinking about it in this way, or this is my bent towards addressing this, maybe a problem I'm facing, or how to go about learning something is
Hmm.
strengths are really influencing that piece.
Yeah, that's true. And I love that you said language because I was feeling that myself when I first took this assessment almost 15 years ago now. And when I took it, it gave me the words, right? It gave me clarity about why I do what I do, but then even how I can do it better by implementing those strengths a little bit more intentionally in certain areas. And so that was really, really helpful. The language was key for me to understand that as well.
Yeah, it's kind of the beginning of the journey. Like, here you go, here's this information, and now what are you going to do with that? And
Yeah,
I think, a targeted way towards development. Like, how do I become better at what I already do naturally well?
that's
So
great. Yeah, that's really
that
helpful.
always hits my positivity. It's like, oh, let's talk
Yeah.
about what is right with us. In a world
Ah,
that likes to
shock.
focus on what's wrong,
I hear
Gallup
you.
you, hey, here's what's right.
That's awesome. And with my activator strengths, I got together with you and said, hey, let's do this. So let's do this. Well,
Exactly.
today, you and I had talked a couple weeks ago, and I was inspired by a post that I saw, and it was talking about the leaders always learn. Leaders keep learning. I think it was a John Maxwell post. I cannot remember, but it was leaders always learn. We continue to learn. We keep learning, and I love that. My number seven is learner. I do love to keep learning, and I think we all learn differently, right? So for me, I'm an experiential learner. So today I want to talk about let's give people an experience as we talk about our strengths and how they help us to learn and how they help us to lead, right? Because as leaders, we are leaders in the industry. We are both coaches. We work with clients. We work on different teams, different organizations. In our own lives, you run a business, I run a business. Mine is SEMA Global Consulting, yours is Klosterman Consulting. So we have spaces and places where we're leading. We're both moms. We lead in our homes, although our kids are all grown. Yay!
Yeah.
Just kidding. Love you
Yes.
guys. But just leading. Where do we lead? So I'll
Yeah.
let you start. Can you share a little bit about how your strengths are implemented when you lead, or how do you see your strengths show up when you are leading?
When I'm leading. Yeah. So I think, well, I'll just start with positivity. I think when you have positivity in your top 10, you sort of bring that enthusiasm, kind of the bright side. You're able to see, like, how are things going to work out? So, especially in a time where it can feel very contentious and like, how are things going to work out? If
Yeah,
you
right.
have right? If you have positivity in your top 10, that is a unique perspective that you get to bring when leading others, being part of a team, of just being able to see realistically, like, we're not discounting what is actually happening in the world, but we're able to see like beyond just what's happening, and that there is kind of a bright side. There is light at the end of the tunnel, that idea. So that's how positivity for me kind of comes through. It can be challenging if you're around a lot of negativity where it sort of douses the light of positivity, I would say, like kind of. So you want to be aware of that maybe within like personally, like where am I feeding my positivity if it's really being challenged within the workplace? Where are those moments where I can sort of nurture it and help it grow if it feels
Okay.
like it's getting beat down, so to
Yes.
speak? Um,
Hmm.
Thinking about like burnout and that sort of thing as you're facing like negative, 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 that's a way that can begin to sort of douse positivity, if I was going to say it that way. So
Sure.
just kind of having an awareness around that. And I think that that's what knowing your strengths brings to the table. If
Hmm.
we wouldn't normally say like positivity is a strength, like you wouldn't necessarily see that if you hadn't gone through like Gallup's assessment and kind of it's
Sure.
interesting how they kind of point that out. So when we look at the 34 themes,
Mhm.
they're not necessarily what traditionally maybe would have been called strengths, and yet Gallup studied leaders and they know that these are the paths to success. So
Yeah.
even your positivity, there is a way to be successful through that strength.
Thank you for sharing that. And I was just thinking, as you were talking about positivity, that it's a strength. And, after doing the assessment, that's what you got that word. I didn't get that word. And what's
Mhm.
interesting is I've been in a lot of situations where people will say, "Oh, you're so positive." And so I have to kind of check myself and go, "Well, wait, it's not a strength. Okay, it's part of my personality, but it's not a strength."
Mhm.
So can that be, that's obviously a thing too, right? Like it can be part of someone's personality, but unless you're doing the assessment and you understand, kind of how you're wired, then as it shows up as a strength, right?
Right. And so it can still be if you have positivity, like my husband, it's at the bottom of his strengths results. It's like number 33. So we joke about that. But it doesn't mean that you're negative. Like one thing we want to be careful of when we think about Clifton strengths is if you don't have something in your top 10, it doesn't mean that you don't have that strength. Like empathy can be one that kind of gets people a little activated where they feel like I'm empathetic, but it's more about how do I lead? How do I,
Mhm.
if I walk into a room or I'm approaching a problem or I'm learning something, your top 10 is kind of your go-to. It doesn't mean you don't have access to the others. It just may not be the way that the filter through which you're going to process the information you're looking at. And so for me, like with positivity, especially as number one, and because I've known my strengths for so long, like and I've developed it. So I've like, okay, now I know my strengths, then I've worked on
Yeah,
intentionally practicing them.
right.
I don't have to think, oh, I better be positive about the situation. I am more inherently like, give someone the
Hmm.
benefit of the doubt, try to see how it could work out, try
Yeah.
to see how what their intention might be. And it tends to have a positive effect. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to be realistic. So I'm
True.
always trying to balance, right? I don't want to come into the meeting and then the blind spot would be I jump to the positive
Right.
and people think I don't have a grasp of reality. So I want to
Mhm.
be really careful and attuned to the fact that people need time to get to the positive. I'm going to bring
Yeah.
the positive, but I'm going
Mhm.
to be intentional about my timing of when I do that, even though for me myself, I'm there without even like you tell me a terrible situation and I'm like, oh, well, it could be worse. That almost instantly
Uh,
goes to my brain. Like, oh,
mhm.
well, it could have been worse. X, Y,
Right.
and Z could have happened. But then the wisdom is I don't necessarily share that right away.
Sure, sure, sure.
No.
So many things we don't
So
share, right? So
yes,
true.
yes.
That's really helpful. I'll go do mine now with connectedness.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I usually lead with, when I lead with connectedness because I'm looking for that connection with the people in the room. I do a lot of Zoom classes and courses that I've been facilitating. It's a little trickier because people don't want to put their camera on, or they don't want to come off
Sure.
mute, and I don't know if they're in the room. So I try to get creative in how to get connected with them, and for the most part, it works really well. But when I'm in a room, then as an extrovert, I really enjoy being around people and I can feel their energy. So, like you said, if you've got negativity around you, it can be draining. And I know for me as a connector and using connectedness, I don't want to connect to someone that's negative. I go into this space of like, uh-oh, plan B. What are we doing? We have to, so I try to find something, even if it's just one small thing, to connect with that person outside of that negativity
Yes.
when I'm leading or working with folks. For me, I remember there was a situation where I was working with someone and she just did not want me. She didn't want to connect with me, but I needed to work with her. That was the kind of the dynamic, and so I had to get creative. And I thought, okay, I won't sit right by her when we're working on this assignment. I stayed about 5 to 10 feet away. I was
Mhm.
looking like I was doing something else, or I actually was working on something else, but I
Right.
was still connecting, right? I was still
Mhm.
present. And I think that really helped me. For me, connection says presence, and it says that I'm here. I want to show up. What can I do to make this space more effective and more, a learned space, that kind of thing with as a leader.
Do you find with so we share this strength, like
We do.
connectedness.
The next two,
And
actually three.
yeah. And for me, connectedness over the years sometimes has almost, even though it's a relationship building strength, but
Yeah.
I've used it in a strategic thinking sort of a way of because you can sort of see the big picture, you can
Hmm.
see how things maybe connect that don't normally connect. And some of that's my ideation, which is number 6. So you can't really see that strength on our top fives. But
Right.
how does connectedness show up for you in that way? As you're leading, just maybe in your own coaching business, or as you're strategizing, or does it come up for you
You know,
that
it's
way?
really funny. So there are
Yeah.
the four buckets, right? It's influencing, relationship building, executing, and then strategic thinking.
Mhm.
Well, my strategic thinking is my number 10.
Okay.
I'm not a strategic thinker at all. I don't think I am, right? Like I'm like, oh, I need to find someone who's better at this strategic thing. Like I don't know how to get to that goal, but I've got all these
Right.
great ideas, which, is kind of comes from my input. So I try to, I appreciate you saying that connectedness could be a form of strategic thinking. It made me feel a little taller, so thank you. I appreciate that. Because when you look at my strength, it does there was a time where I would look at my strengths and be like, oh, I don't think I could do this, and I don't think I can go do that. But I dug into it a little bit deeper, and
Mhm.
it's actually then my 6 to 10 become the one that I use more often with my leading. So when I think of connectedness and I think of how can I be more strategic, I actually am. I look at the room, I read the room, I'm looking at, okay, what happened outside, whether it's societal or like you and I were talking before we
Yeah.
started recording, we were touching base about some really big things that are going on in our world today and how they're
Mhm.
impacting all of us. That's important because then that also impacts what's going to happen in our experience of leading. And even here, we
Yeah.
both have things in our head that we're like, okay, these things are happening in our world today. But I think when there is a level of strategy, and then there's humor. Like my goodness, I'm a queen of puns. I can't sometimes have a conversation without a pun being involved, and I'm the one who brings it. And to me, that's the connectedness. Like, oh yeah, this is
Sure.
actually a serious word, but no, there's a funny thing to say with that. So that there's a humorous side to connectedness as well. So I do try to bring that when I am leading, not necessarily the puns, but help people realize like there's more outside of who we are. There's a bigger picture. There's more going on in this world. It's not just all about me. But I will say one thing that's really important about connectedness, and you probably found that too, that we need to aim these strengths back to ourselves,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So I lead an initiative called She Speaks, which is for business and professional women here in India. And one of the things that I'll be doing a talk next month for them on self leadership. And
Mhm.
my connectedness screams like I have to make sure that these strengths are applied to myself as well. So if
Yeah.
I'm not leading myself, then I'm
Yeah.
not good to lead anybody else. And I'm finding with a lot of the clients that I'm working with, they don't know about self leadership. They don't understand self leadership. So I help them with their strengths to kind of apply their strengths to themselves, use those versus just in that situation or that relationship. Does that make sense?
Right. It does. And I think that that's like one of the most helpful things if you get your full 34 report is that
Yeah,
each in your top 10, Gallup breaks out like, here's your blind spots. Here's how
yeah.
this works for you. Here's very practical ways to put it in
Mhm.
action. And then also, like, hey, you might not be aware, but like, this is how it might get in your way. And so,
Right.
to your point of like, how am I, it's giving me this data, this
Mhm.
information of how I might be experienced in the world
Yeah.
and a way to be concrete. And how do I develop that? How do I be curious? How do I, always
Mhm.
learning kind of
Yeah.
how do I improve?
Mhm.
How do I have a conversation with people and kind of find out how are they experiencing me and how can
Mhm.
I show up in a more what's the word I want to use? It's early here, so I
Yeah,
can't think
no,
of it
I'm
like
thinking of a word if this helps, like authentic, becoming across authentically
yes.
and transparently, right?
This is why we need one another
We do.
when
And for
we
those,
can't think of words.
right? And for those who don't know, Katie is 9.5 hours behind me in my time zone. So I'm ending my day and she's starting her day. So, yes, that's why we share a brain every now and then, right? Our connectedness shines.
That's right. It's right. I love it.
Oh, that's really good.
Well, I mean, since we do share a few of these, how does responsibility show up for you? Because what I love about strengths is that we can have the same strengths. There will be things that are similar, but then there's these unique aspects for each of us because of the order of our strengths, because of our personalities, because of our
Sure.
life experience. And so it is really rich in information because it's not going to be exactly the same.
Yeah, that's true. That's really good. Let's see how I can address that. So for me, we've got responsibility, connectedness, and woo the same, right? So which one do you
Okay.
want me to grab? Did you say responsibility? Did I
I
grab
think
that one?
responsibility. We'll
Okay,
kind of stick going down the list.
sounds good. So for me, responsibility, I had to unlearn some really bad habits before I could embrace what responsibility really was. It doesn't mean that I had to learn responsibility, like I had a lot of responsibility throughout my life growing up. But when I took the assessment, I realized that it was a little toxic. It was a
Mm.
little bit too strong. I was being way too responsible. And my reasoning was, I'm a mom. I have 4 kids. I've got responsibilities. I have a business. Come on, I'm supposed to be. Am I not supposed to be? And then, what I realized was I was not having fun. There was a
Mm.
missing element to my life. Fun. And this helped me kind of put healthy boundaries around what does responsibility look like for me. And so I embrace the concept of the 2x4 rule. I don't know if it's in Gallup. I don't know necessarily if I heard it anywhere or if I saw it after I came up with it. So I'll be very clear about that. But my 2x4 rule is I had to learn how to be responsible to people and not
Mhm.
responsible for their consequences
Oh, I love that.
or responsible for their lives. I mean, granted, as a
Yes.
mother, yes, I'm responsible for my kids. They're all healthy and happy and older and launched.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was causing me so much stress in my parenting because I thought, man, if I don't do this, the kid won't do it. If I'm not responsible for this, then this, right? Like these outcomes were adding so much pressure to my life. So I had to unlearn that and then
Yeah.
start to relearn it and say, okay, your homework. I'll give you all the tools that you need, and now the homework is yours,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
mine, right?
Yeah.
And that really changed it for me because I was calmer, and
Sure.
I was starting to find that hey, I actually have time to go have fun. I
Yeah.
actually can enjoy watching this movie or not worrying about who didn't do what and what. It took such a burden off my own shoulders and it helped me to kind of be a little bit more stable. And then as I practiced it, I would be in situations where I would feel stress and be like, okay, why am I stressed? Oh, I moved into that responsible for space again.
Oh,
So the two by
so
four is a
good.
piece of wood, and I, figuratively hit myself over the head when that happens.
I love that.
So then with the
Such
client,
good.
yeah, it's a visual, right? But with the client, I'll tell my client straight out, hey, I'm so glad you've chosen to work with me, and I'm excited to see how you're going to execute your goals.
Yes. Yeah.
And they're
as a
looking at me like, what?
reminder for yourself,
Yes,
almost. It's
yes.
more a cue for you and
Hmm.
helpful for them, but also like I'm not
Yeah,
responsible for the output at the end of the
right,
day. Responsible
right.
for showing up, being there fully, helping
Yeah,
create insight, and then action is really in their
yeah.
space. They
It
do
is.
that. Yeah.
And I think just the last comment would be responsibility is about taking psychological ownership for something, right? But
Yeah.
the piece that becomes unrealistic is like, oh, well, that child is not going to be accepted if they don't get their homework done, if their project isn't amazing. I definitely wasn't a helicopter mom. I'll tell you that right now. Let me be careful using that term. But anyways, my point is,
Yeah.
it was a sense of freedom. Like I got the freedom once I realized the responsibility. I applied that to myself, but then also started to put more of the responsibility on the other person, right? So that
Hmm.
ownership was now clearly defined, like I will
Yeah.
own my part of it, the 40%, and your 60% is on you kind of scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah. How
That's
about
very
yourself? Tell
it's
me.
interesting. I have like so many thoughts that are coming
Ah,
up with responsibility. Just an example from motherhood and kind of strengths and how it can be like practically applied to. So three of my four kids have taken their strengths. My youngest,
oh, fun.
he's like, I'm not going to. I'm like, all right.
Only
So
one of mine
anyway,
has. Yeah,
yeah,
only one of mine has, and that's the engineer.
yeah.
Shocker. Very
So,
exciting.
but my youngest daughter, when she was in school, we were having a conversation on the way to school one day. And I said, you know what I realized is my responsibility is getting activated because you are not doing your homework. So Parent Portal
Yes.
is telling me, like, your
Yes.
homework's late, this isn't done. And I realized I'm like, oh, I'm like feeling responsible for stuff that's not even mine to feel responsible for. And we had such a good conversation in the sense of I said, you know, I have responsibility number three. I was able to sort of frame it in this way of um, understand where I'm sort of coming from. It's from this space of my responsibility is getting kind of activated or triggered because you're
Yeah.
not doing homework. And my daughter said to me, you know, Mom, I don't even think I have responsibility.
Oh
She
no.
is so not even like she didn't have any psychological ownership. I'll get to it when I get to it. And
Right.
it
Right.
was a freeing conversation in the
Yes.
sense of like, okay, like we could both see where each other were coming from. So
Mhm.
um she did eventually get everything done and we were both so grateful when she
Isn't it
graduated from
amazing?
high school because it was like, okay, I'm done. But like having responsibility and like Parent Portal just killed
Mhm.
me because
Yeah.
it was just this constant like information of if you have a child who's a little looser with deadlines than you are, it
Yeah.
can be
Right.
kind of stressful, contentious
Hmm.
conversation. But being able to recognize like, where's that coming from? Like, why do I care?
Yeah.
What story am I telling myself about
Yes,
that?
that's huge.
Right. And how do
That's
I
huge.
kind of let some of that go? And I think in parenting, particularly, it
Yeah.
can be we can really feel like our child's story is our story. And so trying
Right.
to separate that a little bit is an
Hmm.
important piece of growth, I think, that we
Yeah.
can initiate and gives us some freedom. I also think like responsibility, if you have responsibility in your top 10, it is easy to get overloaded at work
Hmm.
because people will intuitively know if they give
Yeah.
something to you and you agree to do it, you're going to do it and you're going to get
Hmm.
it done on
Hmm.
time
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
well. And and so that can lead to where you say, if you're not aware of your
Mm.
tendency, you overcommit. You say yes because you're kind of like, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that because you can, you're capable. But then all of a sudden you're in a space where it's like, now I have all these things and maybe deadlines are colliding. And so I think that dark side of responsibility is overcommitting to things. And one
Mhm.
of the things that I've learned over the years is really like, um, my sort of stop is a little, let me check and get back to you because
Yes. Good
my
call.
instinct is to say yes, like
Sure.
because if it's within something that I feel capable of, I,
Mhm.
yes, of course, like I want to
Yeah,
help, I want to be the team player, but being able to sort of say, even to my children or work or home, like to say, let me check my calendar and get back to you.
yeah.
Because once you've said yes with
Mhm.
responsibility, it's really hard to undo the yes
Oh, no
you have
kidding.
responsibility because you
Hmm.
then feel like you're irresponsible, letting people down, even if circumstances have changed. So that's kind of an interesting aspect, I think, of responsibility
Yeah,
is really learning what, like what you were saying, what are my boundaries? How do I really work within those? Because
yeah.
it can
Oh, that's good.
quickly kind of trip you up.
Yep, yep, yep. And
Intentional.
for those folks who have trouble saying no, right?
Yeah.
Then responsibility becomes kind of a messy one for them because they now have to learn how to say no. And just to your idea of saying, hey, let
Yeah.
me check my calendar,
Yeah.
then we can figure it out together. I think that's really good. That's
I
cool.
think
So,
the
whew,
other
go
thing
ahead.
before we move away from responsibility, just to
Yeah,
think about, like if you're managing a team or you have high responsibility, you're working with someone who responsibility is further down the list. Not having responsibility in your top 10 does not mean you're irresponsible.
right.
You just do not have that psychological ownership. You don't have as much angst with changing
Yeah,
deadlines. It's
right.
so if you have that high responsibility, you've committed to something, changing a deadline or moving things around is a little bit more challenging versus
Mhm.
someone who has responsibility lower in their list. So
Yeah,
I think always wanting to remind people about strengths is that um, the opposite is not true of
yeah.
like, so we wouldn't say like, oh, if you don't have responsibility, you're irresponsible.
Hmm.
That is not the correlation that we're
Correct, correct. That's a
making.
good clarification. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
good. I'm a DEIB practitioner, which you're aware of, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. For those who don't know, and I don't have includer as a strength. So how funny
right.
is that? It's like 32 on the list for me, which when I first read that, I thought, no way, that's crazy. But then when I look at my top five, it comes from my connectedness and
Mhm.
my belief and woo. I would say a good combination of
Yeah,
those. More of the connectedness, right? Looking for that connection with someone.
right.
And so then, once I kind of did that work, I was like, okay, I can sleep easy now because I do think I'm a very inclusive person. But even if it doesn't
Right.
have, so to your point of like, it's not that you don't have it, it's just it doesn't
Yeah.
show up in that way, but then it's a
Right.
combination, right? And so many times we've talked about it together, but then also probably with our clients that the combination of these strengths have a result in a different way as well.
They do. Like I once had a client that his top five were really unique. He had all strategic thinking in his top five. However, his profession was really based on relationships. And this was an interesting, it was so fascinating. But what he had done is very strategically
Mhm.
created a spreadsheet of how he would
Of
manage those
course.
relationships. And so
Wow.
I think that really was such a picture of how just because you have X, Y, and Z strengths, to your point
Right.
about
Right.
includer being at the bottom, it does not mean like you're not including people. Or
Right.
if you have all strategic thinking, it does not mean you can't build relationships. Of course you
Hmm.
can, but
Yeah.
how you go about it is going to be different than how I would go about it or how you
Exactly.
would go about it. And
Exactly. Yeah.
so that's kind of the beauty of strengths is that we're not saying one size fits all and this is what the perfect strengths look like. It's
Hmm.
as I'm doing work, as I'm interacting with the world, this is the lens through which I'm going to be doing. This is the filter through which how I go about doing my work or my
Yeah.
relationship. Yeah.
Right. And what I'm also hearing you say then too is to your from another point that you said about language, right? So it's language, it's the narrative that we have in our heads, and it's not necessarily opposite or negative, but now it gives us language to rewrite that narrative. And
Yes.
true story, in my own story, I can truly say that knowing the language of strengths has rewritten my narrative in so many ways. When you look at just responsibility, responsibility is full of rules, right? Often we're
Yeah.
the ones going, oh, but those are the rules. Oh, those are the rules. And
Yeah.
then there are people that are saying, rules are meant to be bent, while other people are like, rules? Rules? What are rules? You know?
Exactly.
But seriously, try playing a game of cards when all four people have the strength responsibility. Oh my gosh, it was hysterical. It was so funny. I was the one going, you can't do that. You can't help her. Why are you helping her? No one else. Oh, we had such a good laugh. And then I realized I'm like, see, we're all being responsible in different ways. And
Exactly. And I
had
have
to be
like
there.
competition number like
Oh,
I don't know, it's like 32. So I'm
okay.
always like it's about the experience and let's have
Yeah.
fun and
Be
I want to win, but
positive.
not to the point where if you want it more, I'm like, all right, I'm more about are we all together? So that can be
Yeah,
annoying if you have
it can be.
competition in your top 10. You're like,
Yeah, I
hey,
don't.
is
But yeah, I think, I'm a competitive person, but when it comes to games, there's still this responsibility to think we have
oh,
rules for the
interesting.
game. You follow the
Yeah.
rules. You follow the rules. Like why aren't you following the rules for the game?
Oh, that's so
But we have
funny.
fun.
I
But we
love
have
that.
fun. I remember to have fun first, not
Yes,
win. Just have fun.
I know.
Oh man. Okay, what was the last one? The woo then? Woo, I think is the one we haven't
Well,
talked
yeah,
about.
we have Woo. If we're sticking with the ones that we have the same, I was going to
Yes.
say, I love your activator because that's why we're here. Like, I
Oh,
need activators in my life because I have ideation. Number six, I can have a lot of good ideas, and I just appreciate activator because you make sure we actually do the things instead of just talk about the things. So I would not, I'm sort of an accidental podcaster with you because I would not, I
well,
would not be here if it was not for you.
it's kind of fun because when I've chatted with you about these things before, like even our offline conversations, we both sit there going, this should have been recorded, right?
Yes, we do
Because they're
say that.
so meaningful and they're so rich, and we really appreciate that. Maybe our listeners are like, okay, stop talking, move on. So maybe we'll have to cut this into two episodes. I think that might be a good
I
idea for next
I
time.
like that idea.
Yeah. So you know what? And thank you for being so positive about my activator because so many times people get annoyed by my activator. And it's just, so for example, my husband is a strategic. His number one is strategic. And strategic and activator, they don't always get along very well,
Yeah.
because the activator's like, hey, let's go do this, or let's just try it. And the strategic one is saying, well, we need to look at the budget and we need to check the finances and we need to make sure, like, what about this? What about that? I'm like,
Interesting.
oh, wet blanket, you know, but
Right?
then realizing like, whoa, activator, like you need to make sure that I connect people to the topic, to the idea, and then we can all move forward together instead of like, so thank you. I'm not trying to be like, let's cut off and move on. I think I'm thinking responsibility. I don't want people to get
Yes.
bored.
You're much more aware of like, okay, where do we need to like cut this and
Uh-huh.
how do we have it in bite-sized chunks and um but I think activator is so awesome because it is that sort of like we won't be in a meeting and just talk about ideas and not ever take action. So activator is
Exactly.
always going to make sure like we're moving forward. Maybe not with all of the details we need, but like we'll figure it out
But
along the way. So sometimes if you have somebody with high
mhm,
deliberative needs a lot of details and a
they
lot of
do.
context and like
Mhm.
how are we going to go forward. And so sometimes if you have high activator or you have high deliberative and you're bumping heads with someone at the office, it
Seriously.
can be interesting to see like what are your strengths and how are they kind of bumping into one another because they
Yeah.
go about doing things kind of opposite.
Yeah. You know what? Growing up, I loved bumper cars, like no lie. Using there, my connection thing happening again. Anyways,
Yeah.
loved bumper cars. But as adults, when you have these strengths bumping into each other, you're so right. I actually had someone on my team last year who had deliberative and intellection. Poor
Oh yeah.
guy. He's got me. I'm like, activator, hey, we're gonna do this. And he's just like, give me a minute, like a week
Right.
to think through this. So I was like, okay, wait, I need to make sure when I give him this information, let him know, like, hey, I need this in 3 days,
Hmm.
or this is an idea going forward. This is what I would like. And so we would meet at the front end of the month. And he was my media support person. We would meet at the front end of the month. And by the end of the month, like I had to give him a game plan of these are the things that I need to give him in the month. Man, between my ADHD and just like excitement and extrovert and activator stuff,
Yeah.
I was like,
Yep.
it wasn't forcing me into a box, but it was definitely training me how to be a little bit more thoughtful and help
Mhm.
manage my activator self, but be like, oh, he's got intellection. He's going to mull it over, maybe for
Yeah.
too long sometimes, which he did, and he knew it. We worked through that. But he also needed, just to deliver, to weigh it out. And he would ask me questions like, well, is that part of your main goal? I'm like, no, but it's fun. Like, can we try it? you know?
Right.
So I think part of like my number six is input, right? So input I'm collecting. So I'm collecting ideas and I'm doing these different things. And the activator and input need people who are intellectual and deliberative and a little bit more like rein me in. It's okay. And I give people permission to do that. It's okay. Rein me in. Tell me we can't do this. It's fine. We'll figure out a way to do
Right.
it. Tell me now. It's okay.
It's such a
I had to
beautiful
learn that.
partnership
Yeah.
to come together because that activator strength is going to make sure action is taken at the end of the day,
Yes.
that we actually
Yeah.
do something.
Make
But
a decision.
that deliberative intellection, those thinking,
Yeah.
like slows it down a little bit to think about maybe the details and the hiccups that might come into place. So as long as you know that about each other, you can
Yeah.
appreciate that, right? Like
Right.
strengths is sort of this invitation to appreciate our differences, to say,
Yeah.
oh, like you're thinking about this in a different way, and I didn't think
Mhm.
about it that way.
Mhm.
But if we don't come with that sort of posture, it can be more irritating and frustrating.
Agreed.
Like, you're trying to rain on my parade. You don't want me to get to do
Yeah.
this. And that's not what's happening. So,
Right. Right.
it's an interesting kind of perspective to sort of say, okay, what's going on here? And strengths gives
Yeah.
us that language to kind of
It
do that.
does. And you know what I've discovered too is when I meet with someone for the first time and it's just it feels like this, right?
Yeah.
Something's not right. Like what's going on? What's going on? I've practiced these enough and been working with them long enough that I'm able to take a step back and kind of go, I wonder if they have the strength that mine doesn't like. Or I wonder if like they're doing the opposite of what I'm trying to do, like because that's their strength. I wonder what their strengths are. And somewhere in that conversation, I come around to, hey, have you ever done your strengths assessment? Because I'm sort of seeing some of these strengths in you, and I'm wondering, woo, of course,
Right.
steps in, and it's like, let's turn this ship around because right now, if we don't, someone's going to offend someone and someone's going to say the wrong thing, or I might get a little too toxic because I'm aware of what my strengths are, or, they're just the leading goes away and it becomes like a tiff, right? Or a conflict.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So I
Well,
think we have the privilege of leading people with our
yeah.
strengths. Dun dun dun. Introduce woo. Woo means winning others over, right? And I've been. It was funny before I had, obviously over the years I've done these with this assessment, and um, somebody has. I've had several people say to me, Kanita, I can't say no to you. This is my problem. I can't say no to you. And I would be like, well, why not? It's no. Say no. It's fine. But it would be in situations where I was like, but you know what? I see your potential. Like it's really important that you try this or go this direction. I really see, like I was trying to really build them up and maybe not the way that I
Yeah.
needed to, and I learned how to do
Yeah.
that. But that was the woo. And I didn't realize that they didn't recognize that. They didn't realize it was a strength. I didn't realize it was a strength. Then I got the
Yeah.
language. And then I was confidently able to say, you know what, that is one of my strengths. I do try to convince. I'm not trying to be overtly convincing, but I'm
Right.
just trying to say to you, like, I see your potential. You've got these qualities. You have this fight. You have this drive. You've got this ability. Like I try to point that
Yes.
stuff out. And then they're like, now I really can't say no.
Right. And that, I think that's
All
your
right.
woo connected with activator. Like when you describe
Right.
woo, it's a lot of like them taking action. Like how am I winning you over to this action we need to take? Which is
Yeah.
interesting because like woo for me is a little bit I always describe it as a shy woo. I have relator in my top 10. So it kind of I don't know if I would say dampens, but it tempers my woo. Um, but there's also this piece of I just had my annual physical recently and I was chatting with my doctor and she's like, you do this every time. This is your appointment. And now I'm telling you all about my life.
Yes, right.
And I'm like, oh yeah, that's true. I do that. But it's like I'm asking questions.
Yeah.
So it's that I think comes in play when I'm coaching. I'm really interested in your story.
Absolutely.
I'm fascinated by all these different stories and life experiences that people
Yeah.
have. And I want to connect,
Yeah.
so you have connectedness with like, how does this all fit together and that relationship building side of things. So winning others over for me is really shows up more in wanting to know stories and
Yeah.
to listen and kind of how do I draw you out? And it also will come up for me. I don't know if you have this, but if someone doesn't like me, like
Okay.
or they're just not interested. It's not like
Yeah.
this I active I don't like you, but it's like
Yeah.
they're maybe just indifferent. I
Okay.
sort of feel like challenge accepted. I must have you. I I'm so want to get to know you. It doesn't turn me off to have someone sort of standoffish. I
Yeah.
think that's that woo. If someone's sort of like off in the corner, sort of disinterested in the group, there's this part of me that wants to find the connection that will bring
Yeah.
them within the group. Like,
Right.
where can we connect? Where's the thing we have in common? And so I think that's woo for me is kind of plays out that way. It's kind of interesting.
Interesting. I have to think about that. I like how you said challenge accepted because I'm like, oh, I say that a lot in my head. It's for different things, right? And so I'd have to watch myself the next time I'm in a situation
Yeah.
with woo and see what that is. I find myself like if I'm in a group of strong leader women, and I can tell that the women really want to, like, there are certain women in the group that want front and center and they want to be out there. I take a step back. I'm like, nope,
Yep.
I'm good.
Yep.
I don't need to
Yeah.
be. So I don't think I'm turning off my woo, but I'm saying, you know what? Now is not the time or the place.
Well, in some ways, that is wooing because you
Yeah,
recognize the need that they have to be maybe more front and center. And so you pull back. I
yeah,
think those are aspects of woo, of winning others over in the big, like,
in
how
a
do
different
I
way.
help you? Yeah. How do I help you feel comfortable? How do I
Yeah.
help bring you into this group? If it's a
Hmm.
group situation.
Yeah.
Um, but also in making others comfortable, it's that influencing theme of like how I'm influencing people by winning you over somehow.
Yeah.
Oh it's not a manipulation. It's just
No.
more of this sense of like I want you to be part.
Yeah.
And woo is also the fun, like it's fun. Like
It
I
is
always
really fun.
think,
I love it.
yeah, like
I
there's
love it.
this part of having a good time and wanting others to also have a good. There's this
Right.
inclusive. I mean, what
Yeah.
would be interesting is how does woo fill that includer space for you because you said
Hmm.
includer is at the bottom
Hmm. It is. Yeah.
of your 34.
Yeah.
It's like how does woo come into that space and do that for you?
I think for me with Woo, when as it relates to includer, would be that I'm in a room and I'm looking around, and if I see someone, if I connect with someone, or if we're just like, hi, my name's Kanita, who are you? Kind of that you're getting to know each other. My
Yeah.
energy level goes up, like I can feel all systems are go, and then I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm moving into Woo. So
Yeah.
asking questions and engaging and listening to what they're not saying and kind of tagging on those words, the connectedness, but just
Mhm.
keeping that level of energy going in a conversation would
Yeah.
be how I see woo plays out in some of those
Yeah.
situations as includer, right? So then you
Yeah.
leave, and then so this happened recently. I was talking with someone, and then we went into the program, and we were all sitting in a bigger group, and we're introducing each other. And I said, "Oh yeah, I know him already. We go way back, like the hallway." And everyone's like, what?
Yeah. Right.
But that was
Right.
my woo, just kind of being like, okay, let's break the ice. Let's all
Yeah.
just try to
Yeah.
have fun.
Yeah.
And sometimes a little bit too much fun when the work doesn't get done, but that's not my fault. I wasn't responsible for the project. So,
That's that's right. It's like we're just having a good time. Yeah,
yeah,
I
we
think
are having a good time.
it's a fun strength to
It
have.
is. It is. So I
And
feel like
it
today, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, and I was gonna say it just plays out like all the strengths do in so many different ways. I think what's been fun about our conversation today too is that you can talk about your strengths individually, but they really are influencing one another and they are not in a vacuum. So
Right.
which leads to the diversity of how they kind of present themselves in people
Absolutely.
and why
Mhm.
we can both have these same strengths and they're going to look a little bit different. There's going to be aspects that are the same and then parts that are just unique to us
Yeah.
because of those differences that we bring to the table.
Absolutely. That's a great, I'm just going to call it our closing comment. And I will
Oh,
add to that from my side because, when I think of that and we think of strengths, you and I have both probably met a lot of people who say, well, I don't have strengths like you. I can't lead like you, or I don't know how to lead this and that, right? It's like, we're not supposed to be the same in terms of
right.
how we lead. And I've loved our conversation today because it's really captured combinations of strengths. It's really captured how we use our individual. What happens when we both have common ones, but our personalities bring them out differently and we have different learning, right? And so just that very the whole heart of this, and with strengths, they talk a lot about it being our DNA. Your DNA
Yes.
is different than mine.
Yeah.
As we see each other and with our strengths, right? And so
Yes.
enjoying that diversity, celebrating that diversity, and practicing inclusion, which I really didn't think we were going in that direction, but we
Yeah.
do this, right?
Yep.
So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for your time. We'll end it
Thank you.
here and we will join everybody again for our next session, episode 8, probably when we talk a little bit more about learning and how our strengths impact learning. Thanks for watching. Be sure to follow us on YouTube, and then connect with us on the socials. Thank you much. Have a great day.